But then after that, I went to Tokyo, try Swift conference. Something enchanted me about this place. So I took this one free class on getting started with iOS development. That got me up and rolling. So I would literally go home and like learn programming on my own. Probably for my career, it would have been better to go to Capital One. Again, I was sort of enchanted by Tokyo when I went there.
I guess at some point you had this desire from way back to get into development, and you made it happen. You were working for a few years in SF as the UX designer, and at some point you were able to make that transition. So can you talk a little bit about how you actually made that happen?
Yeah, so when I started working at this company as the UX designer, like I said, we had good work-life balance. So I would literally go home and like learn programming on my own. So I did start with like one free class. This is probably one of the benefits of being in San Francisco was there's just tons of free resources for computer stuff, right? Tons of meetups, tons of classes. So I took this one free class on getting started with iOS development. And that got me up and rolling. And from there is a very painful process of like trying to put together my own app idea. Eventually got to the point where people I was meeting at these meetups, I was able to sort of convince one of them that, oh yeah, I'm learning how to do this stuff. And, eventually convinced him to let me work for him. And so that was how I've got my official first job. It was kind of poor timing because, like I said, I think in that bubble time, I was getting paid like too much money. And so there was a certain point where I was like, oh man, I'm kind of sick of San Francisco and I have all this money I don't know what to do with. So it's like either buy a house or go travel. So I went with my partner at the time and we traveled for 10 months. So I could only work for this company for like 4 months. It was very interesting. It was like a very tiny startup. There were, I don't know, 6 of us in this big warehouse thing. Yeah, it was a very good experience.
So that, I guess, would get you used to some of the day-to-day realities of being a software developer with, I'm guessing you were doing like code review and working with like GitHub and all that, pull requests and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, luckily because I came up kind of late in the process, I always had GitHub like that, even from the getting started, the first class, they're like, here's GitHub. Create an account.
Nice.
Here's how you put your thing in it. So that I didn't have to transition through. Although, like, you have to learn more advanced Git, I suppose, once you're actually working with other people.
That's cool. You said it was an in-person class?
Yeah, and it was just a free, like, getting started with iOS development class.
Wow.
Or maybe it wasn't free. Maybe it was like $30 or something. But these kinds of things were happening all the time in San Francisco, I remember. So there were a lot of resources. I used to help teach at like it wasn't women who code, but it was like a similar type of group for the same thing. So there was all sorts of resources available. Yeah.
Wow. So you did the class and then got more involved in kind of the community there. Ended up finding someone at an event that gave you, kind of took a chance on you, and you were able to get that first developer job. But then after only a few months, you decided to move on and actually travel. So you said 10 months. This was like worldwide? Like where all did you go?
Yeah. I went to Mexico, Peru, Ecuador, and then switched over to Asia and went to Korea, Japan, Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia.
Sounds like a good trip. So you were like doing like a couple months in each place kind of thing, like slow travel?
Exactly. It depends on where you were. So like Japan was the shortest because it's the most expensive.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. And then like Thailand and Vietnam are the longest because they're the cheapest. So yeah. Mexico is also a great place.
But I'm guessing that something must have really stuck out to you about Japan during that time, and that maybe that was when you decided that you would want to live here for a longer period of time. Like, how did that actually come about?
Yeah, so that actually did happen. So for work at that, my first tech company was a UX designer. I did go to Singapore for a work trip. That was like my first time in Asia. But yeah, like one of the coworkers, he was like, "Oh yeah, Singapore's great first Asian country because it's like only half Asian." And so like you go there and it was a really good trip. very interesting. And but yeah, it's like everything's in English. It's so easy to get around. Everything's
Right.
clean and nice and safe. And so that was my first exposure to Asia. But then on this world trip, I went to Korea for the Winter Olympics. So was that 2017? And I was, I had no idea what to expect, but all I had in my mind was like initial D, which is Japanese. So it's not even, it's like, I don't know, is it going to be like that in Seoul? I have
Right.
no idea. It wasn't like that. And I remember just feeling kind of like let down by Seoul, like it wasn't my
Mm.
place. I wasn't feeling it. But then after that, I went to Tokyo for the Try Swift conference. And it was something enchanted me about this place. Still blown away. Like every time I step outside my door and like walk around and look up and stuff, I'm just like, wow, this place is so cool. Yeah, there's something about it. I don't know what captures me.
I think initially being enchanted by it is one thing, but now 6 years later, still being enchanted, that's impressive.
Yeah.
Because that's not always the case. Some people, they kind of novelty wears off, but you still feel like very happy to be in Japan even now.
Yes, yeah, and in fact, like it gets so far, it gets worse every year in terms of. I remember after the pandemic, I went back to America for the first time since 2019. I was in Japan already for like 3 or 4 years
Wow.
away from America, right? And so I remember I had the absolute worst reverse culture shock. Like
Really?
literally immediately when I landed and was like trying to get out of the airport, I was like, "Oh my God, like get me out of here," you know?
Okay. What specifically was it about like the US culture that you ran into that caused that, would you say?
It's just like everything is just a mess and everything is so chaotic and like no
Right.
one has any idea what they're doing. And I totally forgot. I forgot like, oh yeah, all the bathrooms are dirty. Just use the bathroom at home. Like, that kind of
Uh,
stuff. I just forgot all this stuff. And so
right.
when I arrived back, I was like, oh my God, like these people are just like everywhere. They're just running around with their heads cut off, like chickens.
Wow. Yeah, because Japan is obviously very orderly, very
Yeah.
clean. People follow the rules. So I could definitely see that contrast after 3 years being a bit alarming.
I think the thing that still gets me the most when I go back is like people just don't really know how to do their jobs and they're not really
Mm,
interested in trying. And that bothers me somehow. Like, I feel like the really beneficial part of the work culture in Japan is
mm,
like everyone's like proud of their work and
mm,
like tries to do it well. And there's no like, oh, you have a shit job or you're just a janitor or this kind of stuff. Like everyone is like so like proud of their work and wants to do it well. And so
mhm.
it's very infectious, right? It spreads to you as well. So
Yeah.
you're like, no, 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 I can't let people down. I have to like get this right. And it's very strange. Yeah, but I like it. And I do remember one distinct experience when I was working at Mercari, which we'll probably get into soon. But one of my coworkers who was English, and I was used to
Mm,
English people complaining all the time, so it wasn't a big deal. But he was complaining
right.
like, "Look at all these people; they have these pointless jobs. Like the person doing the
Yeah,
construction, the lights, and
I
the
do.
person at the top of the escalator cleaning the handrail thing." And I didn't really think of it at the time. I had just, I was literally fresh off the boat.
Mm,
But then when I went back to the US, that first culture shock, those people have the most important jobs. I wish America had someone cleaning the handrails of the escalator. And all these salarymen working in front of the computer, they can just jump out the window as long as we still have the people directing traffic at the construction and the person cleaning the escalator, then we'll still have, nice stuff.
That's a really good point because I've run into similar kind of complaints from people, and it's like, does it really take so many people to do this whatever construction job or whatever?
Yeah.
And it's like the implication I think is that like, oh yeah, back in America we just automate this. We just have systems that do this. We don't need people for it. But it's like, are there actually systems doing it though, or is it just
No,
not done? Yeah,
it's
exactly.
just not done. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. It's just a big
But
mess, right?
right, like whatever escalator handrails are just dirty.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly, exactly. So it's like, yeah, I really got that sense of like, no, 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 like all these
Mm.
jobs are important and everyone should do their job well, and it makes everything nicer.
It does. It does. I totally agree with that. That's good that you kind of still feel that way, even 6 years into your journey here. But let's jump back real
Mm.
quick to talk a little bit about how you maybe found that first job in Japan. So you were traveling, you really loved Japan, you decided maybe I want to stay here for a bit longer, try working here. So then did you go back to the US and then apply for jobs from there? Or how did you actually find this first job at Mercari?
Yeah, so I timed my visit to Japan for the TriSwift conference, which is like, actually, I was told that this is the biggest Apple developer conference outside of WWDC, which is the official Apple one.
Wow.
So it's pretty big conference. And I went there at Tim, who we know,
Nice.
because I knew him from San Francisco, and he had moved to Mercari as well. So he introduced me to some Mercari people, and we went out to dinner, and they were like, yeah, once you finish your travel, just apply. We'll, go from there. And
Wow.
so then I left and continued traveling for a couple more months to Southeast Asia, and then went back home and stayed with my parents while I was applying for jobs. And like I said, I wanted to move to a bigger cities. I had 3 critical job interviews, one in Boston, but Boston, no thanks. And then one in New York, which was I'll just say it was at Capital One. That was an extremely good interview, an extremely good job opportunity. They gave me an offer, and then one at Mercari. Now the Mercari one, they did fully remote, which I don't know if that was normal or if it was because they already met me at the conference. But like before the pandemic, it was not normal to do remote interviews, I feel like. For like New York, they flew me out, and Boston, they flew me out. Yeah, so I had this really difficult choice between like New York, Capital One, or Mercari in Japan, and it was really hard to choose. Probably for my career, it would have been better to go to Capital One. But I was sort of enchanted by Tokyo when I went there. And also when I went to New York for the interview, I stayed one extra day to like be a tourist. And I had really forgotten just, again, how loud and dirty that city is and how rude everyone is. And I was like, oh, I should go. I'm from California. We're not in your face people. So I think it's like a little difficult culture shock. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go to a place with nicer people than California. So I decided to go to Japan.
Wow.
Yeah.
So decision was between Capital One and New York, or Mercari and Japan, and Tokyo. So would you say that was mostly the city that ended up being the decider, or was it mostly the company?
I think it was mostly the city.
I mean, some similarities, but actually 2 very different cities. Yeah, I could see how it would be appealing. There's this dream of living in Tokyo, right? It's a little bit more exotic, a little bit of a different kind of path, I guess, than trying to move to New York. But you said that maybe for your career, just staying in the US and going to New York and Capital One maybe would have been better. Is that mainly because like the compensation is higher there, or there are just more opportunities, or like what is it about New York that you think maybe would have actually been better career-wise?
Yeah, I think like New York is not like Silicon Valley where there's like infinite opportunities, but I feel like there's still a really big, strong tech ecosystem there. And again, I think that the value placed on like software development in general is probably higher. I don't want to try to stereotype Japan too much, but I feel like in New York you have big companies like Amazon, Twitter, Facebook, all Google, all have big New York offices. So I think that it sort of would have ended up in I could have a very traditional software developer job and grow my skills in one role, which I think there's different trade-offs, but I think the Japan working style is not so specialized where you can do that. So I feel like in the US, we're very good at honing one skill and then dividing work up into people that have different skills. Whereas in Japan, they prefer people that are more rounded, and they will often switch into different roles just because like, oh my God, there's a fire over there. Just like go do this other thing, even though it's not related to your skill set.
It is interesting how Japan does that. Even like the like the new grad Shinsetsu hiring system that they have here is more about just getting a bunch of people in to the company, and then once they're there, you kind of figure out what each person's going to do based on like the priorities of the company, rather than like, oh, this person is a specialist in iOS development, therefore we have to find an iOS position for them. It's more just like, we want you as a person, and then we'll figure it out later, kind of thing. And
which is good and bad. So like I have coworkers that worked at Toyota in the past, and like they say they're every 3 years well, basically, they have a very sophisticated skill, like they call it competency management system. It has a database of all the skills of all the employees. And every
Okay.
3 years, they'll be like, oh, yeah, you're a little weak in this area. So go work in that department. And they'll just move you. And so it's like, it's very interesting because you get very well rounded and you can see the perspectives of the rest of the company and your other
Mm.
teammates. But it does make it hard to really specialize.